So we have this amazing counselor, teacher, coach, you know, someone who's just this amazing person, and he's in a position to be able to help you with keys to communication with your family and your partners and everything at home. And I'm so thankful that, and you will be too, that he's here to help with us. So welcome up, Blaine. He even dressed up for you guys. You must think you're goddesses.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I won't use the microphone because I'm going to be jumping around probably and dancing and all of those sorts of things. First of all, let me tell you, it's definitely an honor to be here, to be one of a few males that you guys allow into the fold of the goddesses and to be part of this. I've grown this weekend too. Don't tell my wife. But it's definitely been an honor. And I spent a lot of time, I was asked to talk about, I don't know, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and I've been kind of rolling this over in my mind for 6 weeks. And the ongoing joke was, geez, you know, what's a guy like me going to get up and tell a whole bunch of empowered women that they don't already know? So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. And I thought I'd have a look around and sort of basically see who was here, hear everybody's stories this weekend, get involved a little bit. I noticed on Friday when I walked in, it was kind of, oh no, there's a man in here, a disturbance in the force, right? Kind of so I reached inside for that inner X chromosome there and tried to get in touch with the feminine side. And well, it's pretty darn tough because you know, I'm all man. There's no question about that. That's the way that I'm hardwired, and I spent a lot of time trying to change that. One of the things that really kind of, I don't know necessarily if it moved me or not, but the film yesterday with all the fellas on there apologizing.
Yeah.
I'm of two thoughts, and I have to share this with you because there were a few men speaking for everybody in the whole world. But when you look at the global conflicts and you look at the men that were actually leading it, they were very few. The rest were followers, and they were brought into this. And I don't feel that all men are that that violent, that hurtful. I think most of us honor the women in our lives. We're raised by our mothers. Our mothers are the ones that teach us the values. You know, every time I go into the grocery store and there's a lady walking in, I got my mom's voice going, open the door for that nice lady. Right? And then they look at you like, what do you open the door for me for? That never happens. So, you know, a lot of my values, my core beliefs, they come from my mom. But then when you're raised as a boy, you know, you fall down and skin your knee, and you know, your friends are there kind of laughing at you, and your dad says, suck it up, princess, right? You know, and you got all of that, so you're constantly struggling. So we have this role as fellas to be protectors and, you know, to make sure that everything's okay. You know, back in the day, we were hunter-gatherers, all of those sorts of things. And our roles are changing, and I think we all kind of struggle with it, but you ladies struggle with it too, right? We talk about equality, but we're really not equal. We should be treated the same, but we're not equal. You guys have your powers and your strengths, and you're created differently, and we're created differently. But if we get together and we talk about it and we get that oneness going on, then what we do is we start to develop a collective conscious about the whole world. And what I found was really quite amazing, and this was an observation that I made, was all these women are coming to this retreat, oh, I gotta get away, it's gonna be so nice. You know, but every night it's like, oh, honey, how are you? The kids, ooh, I wish I was home, right? But, so that was, honestly, that did my heart really good. Because, you know, I made a pact with my friends and said, hey guys, if I ain't home at 5 o'clock and checked in, you know, come out to the 4-H center, look for a fresh mound of dirt. I have to admit, you know, it was kind of a scary thing in my mind to get up here and kind of talk. But so I really grew this weekend, and standing up here in front of you guys without an agenda other than 2 words. First one is communication, and the second one is partnership. So I thought instead of telling you about communication and telling you about partnership, I'd like to engage you guys to start thinking about it in your own minds. One of the things that I really had wished I had learned in school was how to read and write. My life would have been so much easier. So I'm going to spell things wrong. I'm going to transpose letters. I'm pretty much hooked on phonics. So is there anybody here that is just absolutely crazy about having things have to be spelled right? Okay. Awesome. I need a scribe. Come on up and join me. Okay, so apparently you're not.
I'm a good speller and a lousy math teacher.
All right, so if I'm spelling things and I kind of look like I'm struggling, it'll look like this. It'll be like A, B, and then holler it out. Do it nicely, right? So I wanted to talk about communication. The reason why I wanted to talk about communication first, because communication is what is the biggest tool that you have to create a positive partnership. So when we talk about communication, I'm going to break it down into its simplest forms. You got a sender and a receiver. Just checking. Right? So one of the biggest mistakes I think I ever made was I took a course on communications at the U of A. And so for a while there, every time Teresa and I would discuss the alternatives, she'd be like, well, why don't you break out that fancy communication course that you learned all about? Because you don't have to, right? But I want to teach you a little bit about communication, and then you guys can start to understand. Most of you probably know this already. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to tell you, you probably already know. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I'm saying that this is the fundamentals of what we're doing. And this is the fundamentals about relationship building. And it's the fundamentals of life, right? Everything that we do is communication. The way that we sit, the way that we look, the way that we talk, the way that we walk, the way that we present ourselves, communication, right? So I want to get you guys thinking about everything that happens is communication. And one of the things is, with communication, is you send a message. All right? The person receives the messages, and then they understand it, they process it, and if you're willing, they'll send a message back. Pretty straightforward, for the most part. Sender and a receiver. And then what happens is, of course, you get this big line of communication, right? Well, it looks good on the board. It took a week to draw that and finally perfect it, but it looks really good on the board. But what happens is of course, there's always a breakdown right there. Can anybody tell me what some of those things might be in communication?
Being misunderstood.
Okay, misunderstood. Okay.
Frustration.
You guys are going to get so fast I won't be able to put it all down.
Perceptions.
I missed it.
Defense.
Defense. Look at you guys go right to the stuff.
Tone.
Tone.
Oh,
Yeah.
how dare you look at me in that tone of voice. I've heard that before.
Judgments.
Judgment.
How about miscommunication? Ronnie says one thing, you know, that's something else.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like Kevin after he's had a couple beverages? Never.
Oh, sweet cheeks.
Justin, my good friend, would you bring me up a glass of water there, sir? Thanks. So I wanted to create this model for you guys to start to think about. Okay? When I'm sending the message, what am I sending? Right? Everybody ever have that situation where you think of something, it sounds phenomenal in your head, and then you say it? And everybody gives you that who farted look? And then you think to yourself, well, okay, now I've got to backpedal and explain it. And I know a lot of guys struggle with this as soon as we start, well, no, dear, I didn't really mean it that way. Well, what are you trying to say? Well, I don't know anymore. Right? So part of it is understanding the sending. What messages am I sending, right? And the receiver, how are they receiving it? But more so than anything, are they equipped to receive it? You can send out a radio transmission all day, and if nobody has an antenna, nobody's going to know that you're communicating, right? They have to be in tune. They have to be in waves, right? And we all know that energy moves back and forth, up and down, and all around us. But communication and sound moves in waves. And if you don't have a receiver that's able to catch those waves, then you're not able to get the message. And I'm sure most of you women have heard this, but that man of mine, he just doesn't get the message, right? So maybe he's not equipped, right? For sure. And I don't want to genderize anything, but I will generalize. You know, do they have the antenna? The little beep, 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 right? Either that or Whoopi Goldberg. So you want to make sure that for good communication, that you're sending the right message to the right receiver.
Not necessarily.
I heard somebody say not necessarily.
No, talking to her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Oh.
They gotta be listening.
Teresa?
Otherwise, don't.
Say that again, real loud. So that was another thing that I struggled with. Oh my gosh, I got to get up here and talk to a whole bunch of ladies about communication and partnership, and my wife's in the office, or in the audience. And it's like, oh no, she's going to start holding me accountable to all this stuff. But you know, I'm okay with that.
You'll get shit when you get home.
Yeah, that old look when you're looking at them, across the room, and you can just feel it. Mom used to do that to me when I was a kid. As soon as you screwed up, you looked at her, and you could just feel it, right? And she knew how to communicate. Or if you weren't looking, she'd sneak up behind you and give you a slap. And not only did you get the slap, but you got the scare from one. Where'd that come from? Right? So I want you guys to start thinking about your sending. Your sending. Think about how am I sending the messages. And then what I really want you to focus on is receiving. How am I receiving those messages? What kind of, you guys called it friction, but what kind of static am I receiving, right? So as we flip it over, we talked about, what did I spell here?
Misunderstanding.
I forgot the G, there we go, there we go. Misunderstanding. Would you guys agree that that's probably 90% of most of the problems? Right? When you sit down and you actually get over yourself, get over your emotions, get over everything, and start talking about the specific communication, it's probably misunderstanding. Frustration. Let's talk about frustration a little bit, right? So two people are talking, and when you're not heard, or when you don't feel empowered, or when you don't feel that your message is getting across, what do most people do? They raise the bar a little bit. No, you're not getting it. Okay, this is how I feel about that. And they're still not heard. So then what do? They go a little bit louder, right? Because apparently, I mean, I'm sending the right message, but the receiver's not getting it, so I'm going to get louder. So at the very least, they're going to hear what I have to say. Oh, I was going to say, I'm frustrated. Right? And this goes both ways. But what happens when somebody raises their tone of voice to you as an individual?
You raise yours back and respond like that.
Well, sure, the walls come up, it's just like a transformer. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Right? Go ahead, raise your voice. I can take it. Right? I gotta tell you what, there's nothing makes me feel worse than having somebody raise their voice to me. The only worst thing about somebody raising their voice to me is if they raise their voice to me in a crowd. And boy, I tell you, there's nothing worse than that. How many people have had that happen to them? Yeah. Yes. And you know, a lot of times actually it starts when we're young, right? Like our parents. All of a sudden they give us a dressing down in front of our relatives. First of all, to demonstrate that they have power and control, but also that they know how to discipline their children. Because I come from the era, you know, everybody disciplined the kids, right? You got to lick it, and then when you went to grandma's, grandma gave you a swat, and then you went over to the neighbors, and they were dressing you down. It's not like that anymore. The pendulum needs to swing back just a little bit because we all need to be accountable for each other. So we talked a little bit about defense. Where does our defenses come? Oh, when I hear, okay, perfect. When I hear something I don't want to hear, la la la, no dear, we don't have enough money in our bank account to buy that new car. As you're walking into the sales department, right? But when you talk about it and when you think about it, your defenses come because you protect yourselves, right? And we talked about it a lot, you guys talked about it a lot this weekend, about thinking from your heart. I give you an interesting piece of information, I don't know if it was already expressed, but your brain can't function without your heart. But your brain you can be completely brain dead and your heart will keep beating. Right? It has its own thing. So there's all those things that come with it. But our defenses kick up because our brain kicks in because, oh no, I've been here before. Nobody really likes to be vulnerable. It's a good place to be if you can walk around totally vulnerable and move up into that enlightened level of thinking where you let the universe do what it's going to do. Tone. How dare you look at me in that tone of voice, right? So what does tone say? Sure. And I mentioned it briefly before when we talk about sound. Sound kind of goes in waves. So what does a tone do? It resonates. Well, and when it resonates, and that energy, it not only that, but it goes to our core being. It goes at a cellular level. When you're walking around, a couple of people walked out yesterday and they're like, oh, you know, because I mean, they put in a big day, they're melting their brains down. And I said, hey, smile when you do that. And I can't do that. Sounds so much different, right? The tone and how it resonates. So really the tone. And usually what happens with the tone with frustration, is there a direct connection?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Last, perception and judgment. Ooh, those are two big ones. Perception. What's your perception? Right? As the sender, what's your perception? How do you see things? What are you talking about? How are you bringing it all together, and how are you developing that into an effective communication model? But also, perception, how am I receiving that? What am I taking that as? I'll give you a bit of an example. Most of you know that Teresa's my wife, and a lot of you don't know that she ran for mayor of Wetaskiwin. She comes home from the goddess's lair last year. She's got rocks in her pockets. And she says, I think I'm going to run for mayor. Being the supportive husband I am, it's like, that's nice. But see, I wasn't really actually thinking that's nice. I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to have to do? So then she doesn't say anything for a long time, writes a letter to the newspaper, and everybody's like, oh, geez, you know, you should run for mayor. So that just reinforces it for her. Masses want me to run for mayor. And they're all telling me about you know, how great my wife is and how she should run for mayor, and I'm like, yeah, So the perception was different. And one of the things that she did ask is she asked me to be her campaign manager. And of course I was honored and scared both at the same time, because if she did become mayor, if you're a bad campaign manager. So I wanted to do the best job that I could do for her and for the community. And there were some things that I had in my mind of those types of things. And those of you guys that know me know that I'm very organized and that I like to, don't look at my desk, because that's not a true indication of how organized I am, but it's all up here. But I like to have things done in steps, and I have a way of doing things that is inclusive. It involves everybody. So I think about the processes that come up, and I think with my head a lot. But in the same sense of doing that, it also helps me to present. So when I'm sending a message, I'm making sure that the message that, well, I'm not always, it happens. I'm a man, I'm not perfect, live with it. Right? So, but you said, you know, I tried to do that. And one of the things that happened was I had some ideas about what we needed to do to run an effective campaign. And Teresa was under a lot of pressure, right? All of a sudden she's not, you know, she's not necessarily Teresa anymore. She's a mayoral candidate. And there was a lot of friction between the two of us. And the friction came because when I would say, these are things that we need to do to run an effective campaign, she would take it as, these are things that I'm not doing right, and then you're, you know, and I was...
You forgot one word, should.
Should. Yes, but I did include be. And you're right, we did. We should on each other all the time. There's so much should kicking around. And ought is another one, right? So, but as we were working together, it became, well, the worst thing is that she's got to go up on stage and do something, and here I'm trying to plan out this perfect campaign and making her cry. And that's the last thing that I wanted to do, was send her up on stage in front of everybody and make her cry, right? And I have to admit, I was kind of bad there a few times, because she's up on stage all dressed in her suit with all these guys. And she's talking about municipal money and budgets and people and inclusion and blah, blah, blah. And everybody else is listening and nodding. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm tapping that. So I wasn't always necessarily focused on the campaign. But, you know, the thing is, though, and the jokes were coming around, like, you know, when she's in chambers, I have to call her, your worship. And that was a little tough. I'm like, thank you, your worship. Can I get you another pillow? So perception was huge for me. How is the public going to perceive this? How is the public going to perceive Teresa? And how is the public going to perceive myself and us as a couple? Because collectively, we do a lot of things in the community. Lorene had mentioned that a few things that I do with football and Special Olympics. I'm really involved with Special Olympics as my passion. I've been doing that for, well, 23 years. I actually got a 20-year watch. I'm not wearing it, but I got a 20-year watch, wore it for 6 months, and the battery died. Well, I don't know what that was. The universe was saying to me about that. But, and last but least, judgment. Right? What's our judgment? What's our personal judgment, our own character? How are we judging ourselves? And if we are, what are we using? How are we raising the bar or lowering the bar? But judgment from others. That's what we're looking for, right? It's that perception. How are other people going to judge me and judge my actions? Well, I got a little bit, unless you're in a public office, most people don't really care, right? And if they do care, they got so much junk going on in their own lives that they're busy fixing other people's lives, and it's kind of a diversion tactic, right? So as we're going through, as a sender and a receiver, start thinking, how do I prevent misunderstandings, right? Because none of us really want to go fight with our spouses, with our partners, with people in the community, with our neighbors. That can get awkward. Walk out in the morning, hey neighbor, screw you. Yeah, screw you too. Right? That's a great relationship. Unless she's cute, maybe it's an invitation. But anyway, see, that's how men think, right? She's a little aggressive. She wants me. That's just her way of trying not to think about it. Right? So you want to create, you know, but you want to create that judgment. And really the judgment means nothing. And the perceptions are always wrong. always wrong. Because you don't have enough information to make a good decision on those. There's our perception, there's the other person's perception, and then there's actually where it is. And most of our perceptions are built on misinformation. So as a sender, if you're sending the wrong information, what's the receiver going to get?
Wrong information.
Wrong information. So what's the receiver going to send back?
Wrong information.
Oh, funny how that works. Right? Every once in a while we'll get it right, you know. But it's all about the perception. And some of it is intuitiveness. One of the things that I've learned in my passing is when people are cussing at me or swearing at me, which doesn't happen too often anymore, right, Teresa? That it's not me that they're attacking. It's their own insecurities, right? And they want to be heard, and they get these defensive walls up. And it's really interesting because I deal with a lot of government agencies, and some of the people that I have struggle with barriers to employment. And a lot of times those barriers are their communication skills and their self-esteem and their self-worth and those sorts of things. And they get on the phone with a government person who's talking with words that they don't necessarily understand over a phone and disqualifying this individual without even meeting them. And it makes it really difficult. So for me, I find that frustrating. My story, on Friday when I rolled in here, first thing Friday morning I was in the government office, and I had brought this person all the way from Pinoca to Wetaskiwin to sign a paper. That's all they needed to do. But because of government policies and those sorts of things, I couldn't take the paper to that person and have them sign it. So I had to go pick this person up, and then we get to the office, and this lady's in the office, and I said, you know, there's papers here that we need to sign. Oh, well, that person isn't here. I said, yeah, I know that person isn't here, but we need to sign. Well, she's not here, so you're going to have to come back on Tuesday. And I'm like, no, I can't come back on Tuesday, but I talked to this lady, and she said that the papers are here. Oh, no, she's not here today. You're going to have to come back on Tuesday. And I'm like, okay, something's not working here, because the papers are here, and we're not coming back on Tuesday because this lady said that the papers are here. But she so quickly jumped into her own thing that our messages weren't getting across. So I actually had to come quite direct with her, which very seldom happens with me. But I said, look, we're not coming back on Tuesday. The papers are here, and I want you to find an employment counselor that we can talk to, because I'm sure that this has been set up and you're just not in the communication with them. And how do we keep from getting into the frustration? Because most people react to the frustration, and if you don't have the skills socially or emotionally to deal with that, all of a sudden it becomes a huge issue. And I have to tell you, a lot of times in the situations that I'm dealing with, we're talking about people that are on the verge of being homeless and you know, haven't worked, have no money, got bills to pay, kids to feed, all of those sorts of things. Where do you think their frustration level is when they walk into a place like that? Very high. Very high. So of course I, you know, breathed, went to my quiet spot, and I have a quiet spot, right? It took me a long time to find it though, because there was lots of stuff on top of it. But you know, and I talked to her and I said, you know, really we need to see EC, and you know, these papers are here. I had this conversation, you know, just check it out. So of course she goes off in a huff. It's like, and then she sticks her head in the office and there's a guy out here that says there's a paper from such and such, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have it right here. Yeah. And she walks back, right? So when I'm like, vindicted. Yes. But it was unfortunate. One of the things that happened though, of course, is the trip back to Pinoca. My client and I were discussing this situation, and neither of us were overly thrilled about the whole process. So instead of taking the process and turning it into a positive thing, which it would have been, it was quite a negative experience. So, everybody up to speed on communication? Yes, sir.
Sorry, do you mind if I just add something?
I would love you to.
Another thing that I've found a lot in the relationship I've been in for the last 5 years, and others, and in my professional life, is the big thing is vocabulary. the difference between escalating and de-escalating a situation is thinking it over and choosing the right terms. And I'm like, Christina has gotten to the point now, sometimes I'll say something, she'll be like, did you mean this? And I'll stop and I'll take that back and I'll think for a minute, I'll be like, yes, thank you, that is what I meant. So it's just kind of choosing the right words. The one word can make the difference between how somebody takes the message, right?
And that's exactly, that's where, right where I was going. It's kind of neat how the universe brings that in now. I mean, isn't Tony amazing? Not only does he look good, but he's insightful. Let's give him a big hand. I learned a lot from Tony with his, you know, just his kind of demeanor. And you gotta admit, Christina's a ball of fire. Anybody that can sort of, you know, work within those ranges and be able to keep things in check. Definitely is an effective communicator. So I wanted to kind of bring this, I just want you guys to think about, you know, what is the message that I'm sending? What is, and how is that person receiving it? And are they equipped to receive it? So that basically brings us to the next tool. And this is a big tool, and if you start to use it, you're going to really start to achieve things that, of course, as Tony has already demonstrated. It's called clarification. Clarification. C-A-T-I-O-N. Am I close?
Yeah.
You guys were talking about baggage. My story is a little bit, I had a rough time in school. You know you had a rough time in school when you're on a first name basis with the custodial staff. Standing out in the hall, how are you today, Blaine? Good, George, how about you, sir? Right? They expected to see me if I wasn't there. Oh, we must be on a field trip. And even on the field trips, right? And honestly, a lot of that wasn't because I was stupid. A lot of it was because I just didn't learn the same way as everybody else does. I have a learning disability called dyslexia, and it takes me a long time to do stuff, reading, writing, math, all those sorts of things. So I would spell words wrong in school, and I could create the greatest composition ever, but I would get 2 out of 10 because they would mark me on my spelling, right? And so, of course, that very quickly became a student of alternative communications, right? So if you take a class clown and you give them heck and you move them up to the front of the class, guess what you give them? A stage, right? Exactly. Or if you move them to the back of the class, I have to work that much harder to get everybody's attention, right? I was just going to say, yeah, then all of a sudden, guess what they decided to do?
Didn't work.
They decided to create a barrier. So they just maybe be more creative, maybe work a little bit harder to get my message across. I had a high school diploma. I did get that. That was, you know, that was quite the thing. Most people were really surprised, but I got her, and that was a goal that my dad set out for me. So, and we achieved it. But it came time that I had to more or less reinvent myself. How do I go from being the big, strong goon to, you know, doing something different? So I had finished my first aid instructing course just before I got hurt. So I thought, well, you know, I'm going to go into occupational health and safety, because occupational health and safety at that time was making a transition to behavioral-based safety models. And I was really good at behavior modification and behavior management and those sorts of things. Because my own personal belief at that time and today is that behavior is a communication moment. People communicate through their behaviors, good, bad, or indifferent. That's big. So from there, I went back to school, and I went to the U of A, went to Northwest College and Red Deer College all at the same time. Now, this was the guy who spent most of his time in this hallway, right? So I'm walking into the school, just waiting for the teacher to kick me out. But it was kind of cool because I took control. I took control of what I wanted to do. I took control of how I wanted to do it, and then I put everything into action. And I was terrified that first day. Don't even remember the first day. But I remember my first assignment came in, and I did this assignment and I worked diligently on it, fully expecting to get 50%, because at least half of it's going to be wrong because they're going to mark the spelling mistakes. Well, when he brought it back and I had an 87 on my paper, I'm like, oh, that's my name. And I didn't know how to take it, right? I never had achieved that type of success before. So it's like, well, I got 87. I don't know how I got it, and I don't believe that I got it, but I got it, so here's the proof, right? So then actually started to happen again. And over that time, I did win an award for academic excellence. Imagine that, right? We're at this function, and all of a sudden they're announcing all the awards. And for academic excellence in computers, Blaine Fuller, eh? And I'm just like, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, what? That was your name. For what? You won an award. No. And then you sit your friends at the table, and you're like, no, I'm not standing up because they're joshing me. Are you going to go up there? You're going to go to take the award, the guy's looking at you like, no. Get out in the hall. All right, so once that started to happen, things kind of started to roll. And I was fortunate enough to do a bunch of volunteer work. And a lot of the volunteer work that I did in my life has gotten me to the point where I'm at now. And Teresa taught me this lesson. If you really want to change your life and you really want things to happen for you, you need to add value wherever you go. And it can be as simple as being the last person out of a room and turning off the light to, changing people's lives. I mean, Lorene adds value all the time. Most of my recent personal growth has been being invited by Lorene and then being dragged kicking and screaming by Teresa. Right? No, I don't want to put rocks in my garage. I don't have to.
You have to tie knots.
And I did. I untangled that handful that I had. Right? And, yeah, that was an exercise in patience. Well, the one night we're tying up the medallions and stuff that are over on the board, right? So they're piling it up, and me and my great wisdom, I grabbed a handful and stuck them in the bag. Well, guess what happened? Right? So then, they'll be easy to untangle. Pull, pull, pull. Not so much. So then all of a sudden it became a quest. And I did it. I got up on Sunday morning before everybody else, and I untied every little knot, pulled out the strings, and retied everything. It was quite a cumbersome task, wasn't it, Justin?
Oh yeah.
You got to do the ones they didn't take. But, so all along the way, I've been personally growing and self-developing, and you can never stop. You have to keep that process going. When I'm working with people, the biggest thing is when people stagnate, they don't just stagnate, they stop, and everything goes by them. So they're not just where they're at, they're actually behind. And then once they realize that they're stagnated and far behind, then they start to actually slide down that slippery slope. So you really have to work on the personal growth and the self-development all the time. So I got my occupational health and safety certificate through the U of A, and then currently I'm working on my career development diploma through Concordia College. And that's, has its ebbs and flows. But all along, the thing that made that possible was the partnership. Right? We're all in this together. So we have the partnership with our spouses, but we also have the partnership with our coworkers. Excuse me, we have the partnership with our children. We have the partnership with our friends and family. We have the partnership with the organizations that we're involved with in our community. And partnership is a huge thing, because if your two partners are working together, they're able to move through and develop and create that whole thing. An incredible fast pace and an incredible growth and achieve incredible results. But if those two partners aren't able to communicate effectively, then there's lots of friction. And you can apply that to anywhere that you want. So we want to talk about, how we're going to do this. And Lorene was giving me the sign. I think that means 10 minutes. It not means that I'm a 10. Oh. Who's the stud? Right, so I want to talk a little bit about clarification. And this is the one tool that I want to try to take back. Because most people don't do this. Most people don't clarify. It's all about, right, we talked about the sending and the receiving. And back and forth. Well, what the clarification does within that is it creates the opportunity to make sure that the message that you're sending is being received and that the receiver is able to send back the appropriate message, right? We get clarification. I was talking to, I'm sorry, your name? Raylene last night, and she was sharing a bit of a story about how she, there was some communication difficulties around raising the kids. Anybody have differences of opinions when it came to raising? Who said God didn't have a sense of humor, eh? So, and it was kind of cool because she was talking about how, instead of engaging and escalating, which most of us do, right?
And I used to, yes.
Pardon me?
I can be an escalator.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know what? I haven't met a lady who isn't, and I don't mean to generalize, but oh my goodness, right? If you're not for me, then absolutely you're against me, right? And that's sometimes a self-confidence thing or a communication thing. But she stepped back, she took the opportunity to not engage and wait for the situation to de-escalate, and then she started to get clarification. And it took a couple of times to throw out that message, but what it did do was it took the situation from being actually, you get in an argument, you get in a fight, you don't talk for 2 days, and then all of a sudden you forgot actually what you were fighting about. And then you can forgive and make up. Sometimes people fight just because they like the makeup stuff. Oh, I hate you. Get in here. So, I only have a couple of minutes left, but I think if you want to create your partnership, start to realize that everybody that you're working with is a partnership. The Goddess's Lair this weekend came together as a result of a partnership. Partnership with Lorene, partnership with the board, and the people who are involved. So let's give them a big hand. So when you're dealing with people, deal with them as a partner. And with clarification, right, you bring it down here, own your, oh, I did it, almost felt it wrong. Own your own stuff.
Ownership.
Keeping it G-rated. Right, Morgan? All right, so own your own stuff. And most people don't do that. And you need to do that in the clarification because the emotions that you feel, those are your emotions. The friction that you feel, that's your friction. Right? All of that stuff, you own it. But the problem is you project it, and when you project it, the perception becomes something, and then the judgment is made based on the perception, which is usually wrong. So if the perception is wrong, the judgment is probably wrong. Ooh, somebody said wrong. Did you say wrong, dear? I don't even, everybody, let's try this, ladies. Wrong. Right? So, and the whole weekend, you guys have been spending the whole weekend about empowering and creating that feminine energy. And of course, you guys are the nurturers. Within partners, Dave, how do you take this back to your partners? How do you take this back to your work? How do you take all of this stuff back to your community? I'm kind of like Dana, walk into work. How are you, Blaine? Fantastic! And they look at you. What the hell? Don't be walking around here fantastic, because everybody will expect us to be fantastic. And then all of a sudden, we're creating a way different culture. I'm angry, and I like it. So, but it becomes, an attitude of gratitude. And every one of us is going to struggle in our communication. It takes a long time to develop effective communication. Personalize it, right? How do you talk to yourself? Right? Because how do you talk to yourself is directly reflected in how you talk to other people. Believe it or not, you might not see it, they might not see it, but somebody who communicates and is an observer of people will see it right away. When you go back to your partners, right? But lay down some ground rules. Okay, if you're having trouble with qualification, what is the biggest barrier for good communication?
Silence.
Sorry, somebody what?
Silence.
Silence. Actually, that communicates a lot. Walk into the house, Teresa's standing there. Yeah, the sound of silence was pretty loud there. Right? You know what it is, honestly, and because we all struggle with it, it's safety. Right? Just like me writing on here, I need to feel safe so that when I don't make a mistake, somebody from the back says, "That's a lie, you dummy!" Right? Safety. So you need to set up the ground rules. What breaks down the clarification is, how do I feel about the situation? How do you feel when you have to share some bad news with somebody? Right? You got the butterflies going, adrenaline, you know, all of that sort of thing. Why? Because your brain's kicking in fight or flight, right? Ooh, this may not be safe. I'm risking. Lay down the clarifications, right? If you're in a situation where somebody has difficulty communicating, then communicate about the communication. Lay down the ground rules. Own your own stuff. Do it in a safe environment. Nobody wants to get into an unsafe environment. And that's safety spiritually, emotionally, because, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but word will never hurt me. That's horseshit.
Yeah.
Right? I took a long time. I'd rather have a bone broken, because at least I know that will heal.
Yeah.
So many people have said so many things out of frustration that have created such an unsafe environment that all of a sudden we can't communicate anymore. So lay down the ground rules, and you have that authority. Teresa and I do that. Boy, we're both alpha people. She's an alpha female, I'm an alpha male. So you can just imagine what kind of friction that creates in the old household. But, you know, Teresa's got her insecurities that she's dealing with, and I've got my insecurities that I'm dealing with. And sometimes we don't communicate effectively. And it's taken us a long time to come to this area of safety, right? Because all of a sudden, the communication, if your communication is hurting me because of my own stuff, right, what's my next reaction? I'm going to lash out, and I'm going to try to hurt you back, because it's all about self-defense. Right? I'm going to get all ninja on you, though, because I'm going to use those words that are, you know, indiscreet and indirect. So you're not knowing when it's going to come. Right? It'll be like Cato and Inspector Clouseau. You know, safety is the big thing. Clarification creates this safe environment. Ladies especially, you guys really need a safe environment so that you can communicate effectively. And that was evident here. Right? You were safe here. You had the men protecting, guarding the doors, right, so the farmers didn't come in and burn the place down. Right, and then you felt good with each other. Why? Because the perceptions were changing. And we were getting a little bit closer to the truth. So then the judgments started to become less severe. The judgments in our own minds become less severe, because everybody out here, nobody was judging anybody else. I didn't see that anyways. I actually heard some pretty positive comments, right? But in your own head, it's like, ooh, I can't wear a toga, because what if somebody thinks I'm fat? But after a while, you started to feel safe. So then next thing you know, you're just shaking. I heard, I didn't see. Peeking in the windows. So I have an appreciation for the aesthetically pleasing features of the opposite sex. But if I can send you back for your partnerships, partnerships are a great thing. Relationships are huge. And most people aren't empowered with the tools to make it work. And it needs constant maintenance like a vehicle. It needs stuff like this so that you can get away and feel it. Because, I mean, a lot of you, again, I made a joke about it earlier, but how many of you can't wait to get back home to share this stuff with everybody that you do it with? I have to say, be a little cautious, because if you walk into the house and you're like, what? They're going to go, oh my God, right? Tony, you had a comment, sir?
Sorry, I was just going to add one more thing. I think one of the big things I know in my life, growing in a new relationship, the huge thing with, because men communicate differently than women do, is interpretation. And interpretation is a huge thing. And it makes it, most of you have children. Do you watch the movie Open Season? The bears, anyways, all the animals are talking, but when the people hear the animals talking, like the bears just, right? I think a lot of the time that's what women, you know, men try and talk, but it just comes out, rah, 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 rah. And the ladies stand back and go, what? You know, so it's learning each other's language, really, right? Like, and stepping back. And I know Christina's been really good with that. Like I said, she said, did you mean this? Because she's learned my language, and I'm learning her language, right? Like when she's in a situation, she's saying certain things, and going, now this is how it's coming out, but this is what it means, so I need to do this. Instead of completely reacting to, oh, this is how it's coming, that's it, I'm gone, I'm leaving, you know? So it's learning, it's interpreting how that language is.
Well, and that becomes the fight or flight, right? Survival. You know, you guys, when you go back to wherever you are, you're all in tune to thinking with your hearts. Everybody that you talk to is going to be thinking with their brain. And as soon as something different happens, that little switch is going to go run or fight. Because they don't know how to take it, right? And they're going to be like, you know, and they're kind of back and forth. And I know Teresa and I struggle with it all the time. Nobody likes change. But change is good. And of course, you guys are all vehicles of that. I guess to kind of clarify, it's like taking your old car and you put a brand new paint job on it and you're showing all your friends. And instead of looking at the paint job going, oh wow, they're lifting the hood, listening for the knock that used to be there, right? So, you know, yeah, you guys are going to experience a little bit of friction. And you're going to experience, you know, a little bit of difference. But take that second, right? I definitely use your hearts when you're thinking. What your hearts are going to tell you, right? What is the perception? One of the things that was told me here recently, and I just kind of blew my mind all of a sudden, but our adrenal glands are kind of basically at the top of our liver. So what happens is when your kidneys, sorry, Dale would like to parts. I don't know, just fry them up. Anyways, your adrenal glands, what happens is they flood your body, and you get that butterflies in your stomach and racing thoughts in your head. What happens is your head has a chance to process that, but your gut doesn't think. Your gut reacts. And one of the things that I've always listened to was my gut. Didn't always do what it said. I'm hungry, of course, as you can tell. This is something you have to listen to. But I started to understand that, you know, when those red flags come up, listen to your instincts, listen to your inner self, listen to your gut feelings, right? I had a gut feeling, and you know, you'll be right most of the time. So just kind of in closing, she's wandered in on me here. I want you guys to think about what messages you're sending, who's receiving them. Start thinking about how am I receiving those messages. Move away from the perceptions, move away from the judgment. Start to get clarification. You get clarification, take that time. Clarify in your own mind, clarify with the individuals, right? Own your own stuff. And lay down the ground rules. You have to be safe, otherwise communication isn't effective. You take those back to your work, your partners, and all of those sorts of things, and you'll start to see a change. And I can guarantee it. I'll give you a money back guarantee on that one. But you know, once you become your own person and you're able to communicate that effectively by getting good clarification and creating safety in your life and other people's lives, you're going to really be an effective person in everything that you do. Thank you very much for your time.